it's really difficult being a man in today's world. Um, like if you look at the internet, if you look at YouTube, you find that there isn't enough support for men, and you only see very few literature. You see very few things coming out speaking in favor of men, and I think it's really important because I feel like as a man, someone who's not a chauvinistic kind of man, I feel there's a lot of pressure on men, and no one really seems to understand this. Um, I've always spoken about the rights of women, and I feel like they should definitely be at par. There should be equality between men and women. But when I see that society caters everything for women, all the support groups for women, all the legislation in support of women's rights, and nothing for men, it's just really difficult. You see all kinds of double standards where men, you can see social experiments on YouTube where, if there's some kind of abuse going on between an abusive husband or boyfriend and his girlfriend, there's a barrage of people coming out in support of the woman. But if the same thing is reversed, if the situation is reversed, the guy, is getting beaten up by his girlfriend or wife, people are laughing, people are just making fun of that situation. You know, um, if a woman is, you know, single, she's considered like a strong woman. Um, but like if a guy is like a strong uh, men's advocate and this just wants to be single, there's always taunts about this guy. He can't get any girls because he's not good enough for any girls. So I mean, there's always pressure on guys to perform. Even if you're talking about sex, if there isn't a great sex life, or if a guy's being pushy for sex, like he's told to like consider the feelings of his wife or girlfriend, and like she's always tired, and people are always talking about like she's after looking after the kids, and that kind of thing. But if a guy, there isn't enough talk about like um supportive guys when the sex isn't great. When the sex isn't great, like why is the guy not able to satisfy me? Is what the girl is thinking. So I mean, there's always these kinds of standards where when there isn't enough sympathy given to a guy and how much he's handling. If a guy is going out with his friends at night, there's this stereotypical image where guys are constantly just hanging out with their buddies, and like the impression is that the guys are just fooling around and not being responsible. But if a girl's going out with her friends and she keeps going out too much, and if a guy complains about it, then you're not a supportive husband. Like your wife has such a difficult time, and you should try to understand your wife and where she's coming from. So I mean, feminism, I thought, was about equality. I thought it was about men and women being treated equally. But when you look at these double standards, there's so many of them. You find that it's almost as if like you're supposed to feel sympathy for the woman just because she's a woman, and the guy, they coined the word toxic masculinity, as if masculinity is toxic and it's bad inherently. I mean, honestly, how can this is the crisis that guys are facing, boys are facing, because they've been told that the feminized version of being a man is the best way to be a man, and masculinity in itself is toxic. I mean, uh, so uh, honestly, it's just like guys have a difficult time just trying to like, express themselves, like even reaching out, because if guys reach out, like they don't ever get the same level of support, than a woman. If a woman reaches out to society with a problem, there's always definitely more support for the woman in her issue. whereas when guys reach out, they tend to get ignored or not supported. So it's just really difficult, being in this kind of situation. Look at the media, look at, the kind of roles guys are given, like guys are emasculated, and women, like the when you try to portray like masculinized women, so-called independent, powerful women, uh, and the guys emasculated. That's the kind of trend that you see on, Netflix and on social media and everything. So it's like women are not feminine anymore. They're not feminized. There's just and honestly, I'm not the kind of guy who wants like a patriarchy, who wants men dominating women. But I think there should be equality. There shouldn't be any preferential treatment. And okay, like, I mean, if you're talking about, men have been patriarchal for decades and women have been exploited, I agree. And in Eastern cultures, you have, that kind of patriarchal culture that I'm totally against. And I speak in favor of women in those cultures. But I do also speak out for the rights of men and the fact that they should be respected and they should also be given due consideration, in society. I mean, you just can't leave the men behind, and that's what seems to be the case, where men really do not. I mean, and you call so-called, like, I mean, you say like men have so-called male privilege and toxic masculinity. These kind of words uh, do not, do anyone a favor. And I feel like there's just less tolerance of everything. Everything in the name of women, female empowerment. It's resulting in more clashes between men and women, more broken marriages, more broken relationships. There isn't enough of an effort of men and women to actually work out their problems. And again, I do not believe in controlling your spouse. I don't believe in controlling your wife. I believe you shouldn't be ordering your wife to do anything, but I believe that, women, if they were rational, like if they and they are rational enough, but it's just that society has been programmed in such a way where it's just us versus them. Men